Here again, Professor Pramod Parajuli talking for Annapurna Abundance documentation series. This time, I want to talk about what kind of learning, and I already discussed why schooling is not the right way to think about it, but learning is. Learning as a verb. And on that, if you want to see the role of schooling in making this modern world and what disaster it has become, unfortunately, there is a film online. It is called Schooling the World by Carol Black. Well done. And I have met Carol and her crew in Vancouver probably 8 years ago. We had a fascinating conversation. Schooling the World. Google search for it. You will understand the logic of schooling and what happened. Now, how do we then teach children without the four walls, with the teacher standing there with the authority and rote memorizing and putting the knowledge into the brain and tararara? That we want to avoid that, because that doesn't lead to regenerative learning. It leads to degenerative learning, and it might give you a job on an assembly line like a cog in the machine, but not to recreate this world. So one of the approaches that I have found with my colleagues and my students, it is called the learning gardens. And this idea evolved in Portland, Oregon for me, while I was developing and implementing a master's program called Leadership in Ecology, Culture and Learning. We found out that children in the school system were eating junk food during lunch. The government was spending money, but the food was so bad that they had a wrong relationship with food, although it was provided by the school district. So we talked with the school districts and said, why not children grow their own lunch in the garden, but during that time they will learn subjects and topics that you want to teach them. So it is both sides, the learning to garden, how to garden, and gardening to learn. Different subjects, different topics, grade by grade, subject by subject. And that became one of the most fascinating learning innovation that I am very proud of. And here you can see we created a learning gardens laboratory, and we had a little sign. This is how other cultures people learn under a tree, and this is a little meeting that we are having with the teachers and all that. So let's pause 1 minute. Yes, so it is continuation of the idea of learning gardens. Could you put your there? In Portland, Oregon, and later on in Prescott, Arizona, in Peru, in Nepal, in many places, this has now gone almost global, that children can create their garden, and in that garden they can do both. As I said before, they can learn how to make a garden, and they can also learn all subjects, all topics. The teachers need a little bit of training on how to connect, like a photosynthesis is happening in the garden, where in the biology book is the photosynthesis, right? Water, history, culinary, everything can be taught. So here, this is a picture, collage of a picture of what can happen in the garden. Could gardens be pluritasking? Remember all those brains, multi-brains, pluribrains are active, plurisensory, plurispecies, plurigenerational, and pluricultural. So this is what got me very, very excited, that this could be the way, one of the ways, so that children can have their body and the mind and the visceral vigor and the umbilicus and heart and soul all through the garden, and they will be learning things so deeply without even knowing that they are learning. You see, that was the best part of it. Let's imagine they will be writing a poem about the garden they made. They will be writing a narrative or a text or an article about the pollinator butterfly coming to visit their garden. Isn't that better than teaching them pollination? Do you see how it is? So, inspired by this learning gardens, success of learning gardens in Portland, Oregon, and in many parts of other parts of the world, within the Annapurna pluriversities, we are encouraging and imagining that there will be many kinds of gardens based on where we are geographically and culturally. There will be learning gardens, there will be edible gardens, and on that Alice Waters' name from Berkeley comes out very nicely because she is a chef, created that edible garden, water garden, medicinal garden, sacred garden, forest garden, rock garden like I have here in high desert of Arizona, right? Because here are more rocks, so I created rock garden, which I will show a little later in the front of the house. That way, kind of imagine a garden world. And isn't it amazing that the human beings and the nature are together in the garden? Do you see that? Can you imagine that? Garden is the place where nature and culture comes together, that binds together. This might be the gateway to what we want is the regenerative life systems, regenerative livelihood, and regenerative learning. And these kids will become those regenerative leaders, stewards with ethics of care. So let's begin to imagine learning garden as our friend, as our gateway, one of the gateways to create that Annapurna abundance.